Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Now, changing speed slightly for the channel today. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm changing speed slightly today as I'll be taking a look at the latest Character Options Doctor Who set, which is another History of the Daleks set exclusive to B&M. And oddly, this is History of the Daleks number 18, following set 17, which was actually from the new series, The Passing of the Ways. Set 15, Remembrance of the Daleks, and this set 18, chronologically comes before both of those stories. This is the 1984 story, Resurrection of the Daleks, so this is the 5th Doctor, Peter Davison story. Now, we were told initially that they were bypassing this set completely, bypassing this story altogether. They weren't going to be releasing this set, and yet here we are, no more than a year later after being told that that was never going to happen. I never quite understand what is going on with Character Options. This is one of the many peculiarities that just continue to befuddle me as a collector. So now we have a sequence of History of the Dalek sets that run out of chronological order when everything else, every other story is in order. This doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me, but go figure. Okay, with all of that said, let's take a look at the set itself. Now, if you've picked up any of the other recent History of the Dalek sets, you know what to expect in terms of the branding. I actually really quite like this recent refresh. We've had this for about a year and a half now, I think. I really like the new Doctor Who diamond logo, obviously very reminiscent of the 70s logo. We have that fantastic image of the TARDIS down there, and I really like the colour scheme. I like the contrast between the white and the blue and the sort of like Starfield effect. I think this looks really, really good and very attractive and very displayable. Of course, what we see is this sort of hollow. It's not so much window display as you can literally put your hand straight through and touch the plastic inside, where you can see obviously the two Daleks we're getting here, and we are getting a drone Dalek and we're getting a Dalek Supreme. If we look at the side panel, there's not an awful lot going on here. We have that logo again. We have a bit of the wraparound of the TARDIS coming around there, which looks quite attractive at the bottom. We have obviously the name of the set, and we have the Doctor that it's associated with. So we have the 5th Doctor here. Finally, on the reverse of the packaging, we have an awful lot of text. There's very little in the way of images here, so it's not really displayable, but it is interesting that we have this information about the making of the story. I quite like this approach. This is very different to anything else we get on the market, so I have no problems with this whatsoever, but it's not particularly striking visually, so it's not the kind of thing you're going to want to put on display, really. So let's kick off by taking a look at the drone. Now, we've had this silver drone with the black bumps several times before, different iterations of grey, I think, and there's some minor tweaks and differences. If we take a close look here, we can see some of the nuance. He has this sort of the clear but black ringed ears, as I like to call them, the lights on top of the dome. He has the white eye stalk, and he has the black eye there with the white pupil, which looks really quite striking and works really quite well. We don't always get that detail. That looks really nice to me. If we look at the main torso, we have some glossy paint for the main sort of mesh there, and we can see that on the sort of the black badge, I suppose, in the centre of the chest, but we also have the two weapons, and what I really like here is that actually the main central gun arm is actually tipped with red, which I think looks really cool. It's actually quite striking, and I think this looks really nice. If we look at the bottom of the skirt here, we can see some really nice paint apps here, where they've got that effect of the Dalek being used. Haven't seen a little bit of battle, haven't seen a little bit of a few scrapes there. I really like how they've layered the paint here, so we have black, and obviously we have the silver strokes there that make it look scratched and used and a little bit worn, which I think adds a little bit of detail, a little bit of screen accuracy, which I think is really nice, and fans really appreciate that kind of thing. Now, Daleks tend to be pretty limited in terms of articulation. I'm just going to run through it once here. He does have a swivel at the top of the dome, he has a hinge at the top of the eye stalk, and then we have two further points of articulation in the gun arms, both on ball joints, so you can rotate them all around and point them in any direction you want. Obviously, the Supreme Dalek is exactly the same, and this is pretty standard if you've ever owned any of the classic Daleks in your collection before. Moving on to the Supreme Dalek, and for me this is the whole reason for buying this set, because he's probably the most different. He's very similar actually to the Supreme Dalek that we see in Remembrance of the Daleks, except he had silver bumps, and this obviously has a white paint scheme instead. Now, in terms of sculpt, of course, this Dalek is pretty much identical to the drone Dalek. As we see with most of the classic Daleks, they wear just the same sculpt. What changes between them is the colour scheme and the paint apps that have been used, and in this case we have this wonderful, very, very lavish glossy black paint, which I think looks an absolute treat. You can see your reflection in it, it catches the pixelate beautifully, and I really like this approach. Of course, he has the solid black mesh around the neck there as well. He has the black ears or lights on the dome, and he also has the same white eye stalk that we see on the drone, which is great. Now, if we look at the central chest unit, we can see obviously the silver paint that's been applied to the mesh around the sort of upper skirting, which looks really nice. And just like the drone, he has that really nice red paint on the very tip of his gun arm there as well, which looks really, really nice. Then finally, if we look at the skirt, of course, we can see the major difference here where he has the white, pure white, brilliant white bumps around the skirting, which looks great. And then at the very bottom of the skirt, of course, we can see that self-same worn effect there with the silver and the black paints coming together really, really nicely to create that sort of worn, screen-used effect, which is brilliant. I won't look at the articulation again, but the other thing I should point out is that there are wheels on the base of each of these Daleks, which will allow it to roll along nice and easily. There's 3 wheels there, and you can move in pretty much any direction you like. And that's about all there is to it. So for me, this is a 3-star set. I think it's a very nice addition. It's a welcome one. I'm pleased that they actually did release it, because it did feel for a while there that they wouldn't. And I really wanted to get my hands on this version of the Supreme Dalek. Having missed it first time around in one of those deluxe sets about 15-20 years ago, I want to say. So I'm really pleased to have a second chance, and I think a lot of people who missed this first time around will be glad to pick this set up. Now, I've got to be completely honest, there's not an awful lot that's new or original about this set. I mean, essentially we have the same Dalek now released across 18 sets with just slightly different paint jobs, but that is how the classic Daleks were, and of course no one's forcing you to buy them. So I think this is really a series that is aimed at the collector, and the completest collector at that, of which I am one, and I am a sucker for different painted Daleks. I love my Dalek army, and I'm very pleased to finally have this version of the Dalek. I'm less struck with the drone, in all truth, because obviously he is a drone. I've got this very similar version of this Dalek many times over, but for me it's all about the Supreme Dalek, and I'm really glad to have this specific version in my collection at long last. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.